The MLB offseason is coming to a close with spring training games starting up, and while players are getting to know their new teammates, this feels like a good time for us to take a look at each team and what we can expect from them in 2023. Many teams drastically improved their rosters, while some not so much. 2023 is sure to be a season of twists and turns. Can the Mets finally win the East again? Will the Padres be better than the Dodgers finally? And can anyone dethrone the Cardinals in the Central? Welcome to NMR Sports, a channel where we talk baseball as much as humanly possible, and these are my 2023 National League Division previews. Okay, so a couple days ago I posted my American League Division previews. We ended in the West, so we're going to go ahead and start this off with the NL West. And the first team I want to talk about, of course, is the Colorado Rockies. Now, I'm going to try not to spend as much time on teams like the Rockies that don't really have a chance to contend, but I do want to go over their roster a little bit. Guys like Chris Bryant, Ryan McMahon, and CJ Cron in the middle of that order, each projected to hit over 20 home runs by Fangraphs here. I also really like the Nolan Jones addition there, so hopefully Nolan Jones can get some at-bats in. He's projected to only hit 9 home runs next year. I could see him hitting 15 at least. He was a big prospect with the Guardians, so we'll see what he can do over there in Colorado in one of the most hitter-friendly ballparks in the MLB. Moving over to the pitching staff, there's not much to like here. German Marquez was a valuable trade chip that they just completely decided to not trade. Cal Freeland's had flashes in the past, but nobody else on this pitching staff is really of note. Daniel Bard had a really good season last year. He should have been traded. The Rockies are just an absolute train wreck in the front office, and it's really starting to reflect on their roster. And because of that, I have the Rockies finishing in 5th place in the NL West. Next up, I want to talk about the San Francisco Giants. Now, I absolutely love the San Francisco Giants. I really like rooting for them. I really want them to succeed, but this roster just isn't going to cut it. Thairo Estrada's been okay. Mike Yastrzemski's a solid bat in there. I do like the Mitch Haniger signing. I think it was an underrated move this offseason. Jock Peterson is back. Michael Conforto, you don't really know what you have there, but outside of that, there really aren't any good bats on this roster. There's some good platoon guys on the bench, I guess, in Wilmer Flores and Austin Slater, but then even when you go over to the pitching staff, the starting rotation, in my opinion's below average. Logan Webb's great at the top. Alex Cobb's okay. Manaya's okay. Stripling's okay. Wood is okay. Pretty much it's the okayest pitching staff in baseball outside of Logan Webb. And the bullpen has potential to be great, but it's not really going to matter if they can't put up runs. I just don't think this roster is good enough to compete in what's going to turn out to be a stacked NL West. So overall, the Giants are just, they have a 4th place roster at the moment, so I gotta put them in 4th. Next up, we got the team whose jersey I'm wearing. I'm not an actual Diamondbacks fan, but I did play for a men's league team, so I got my very own jersey. So next I want to talk about the Arizona Diamondbacks. Now I think the Diamondbacks have some really good potential. This lineup is solid. Don't be sleeping on the Diamondbacks here. Corbin Carroll, a top prospect, one of the fastest men in baseball, followed by Ketel Marte. Christian Walker was going crazy with the power last year. He's projected to hit 28 home runs next season per Fangraphs. Josh Rojas can hit a little bit. Lourdes Gurriel Jr. can hit a little bit. And I love the trade they made with the Blue Jays, getting Gabriel Moreno as well as Lourdes Gurriel. Alek Thomas, former top prospect, he's got some potential. And they had some other good pickups in Kyle Lewis and Evan Longoria. I do think this roster is solid and deep enough to at least secure a 3rd place spot in the NL West. I don't see the Diamondbacks as a playoff team, but let's take a look at their pitching as well. You got Zach Gallen, who many think will be in the Cy Young race just like he was last season. Merrill Kelly's a very underrated number 2. Madison Bumgarner's seen better days, but he's still a solid end of the rotation option. Zach Davies, I'll be honest, I extremely dislike Zach Davies, but there is some potential in this rotation. And then the bullpen, you really don't know what you're going to get. Joe Mantiply was an all-star last year. He was phenomenal out of the bullpen last season, and they added Andrew Chafin this offseason, so I really like those 2 lefties. It's just the rest of it I don't necessarily like at all. So we'll see what they can do with their bullpen and the rest of their rotation, but overall I think this is a solid roster. I think it's very similar to the Giants' level of talent, but I'm going to go with the younger talent level that the Diamondbacks have versus the veterans over in the Giants. So with that being said, I got the Diamondbacks finishing in 3rd in the NL West. And the next team I want to talk about is the San Diego Padres. I'm sorry, Padres fans. I know that you want to be the best team in the National League West. It's definitely much closer this year, but I still got the Dodgers ahead of the Padres. Let's go ahead and look at the roster here. Juan Soto, the baby Ted Williams, basically. Manny Machado, fantastic. Xander Bogaerts, fantastic. fantastic. Cronenworth, Nelson Cruz, Matt Carpenter, and it falls off pretty significantly after there. But of course, they will be getting Fernando Tatis Jr. a little way through the season. So once Tatis Jr. gets into the lineup, I do think you have a better overall lineup than the Dodgers do. But for now, the Dodgers still have them beat in depth and in lineup construction 1 through 9. I do think Soto, Machado, and Tatis is probably the most dangerous 1, 2, 3 in all of baseball, but I don't necessarily think the Padres have the depth, like I said, to match up with a team like the Dodgers. Moving over to their pitching staff, their top 3 is fantastic in Yu Darvish, Joe Musgrove, and I think Blake Snell's gonna have a fantastic year this year. He had a great second half last year, and he is just returning to that Cy Young form he showed in 2018. I love the signing of Michael Wacha, especially for the price they paid. Nick Martinez is solid, and then Seth Lugo they picked up as well. We'll see what they do at the end of this rotation. I'm not super confident they're going to use Seth Lugo in a starting role, but we'll see what happens. And then their bullpen, we saw it in the playoffs last year. Their bullpen is good. Obviously, we know who Josh Hader is, but some of these other guys were phenomenal for them down the stretch last season, so we'll see what happens. I definitely have the Padres making the playoffs still. I just think they're not going to win the division. All right, next up, you know we got to talk about it, the Los Angeles Dodgers. I can't believe I'm saying this, but the Dodgers are underrated. That's right, you heard it here first. The Dodgers are an underrated baseball team in the year 2023. Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Will Smith, Max Muncy, and that add in JD Martinez, that is a dominant 5-player stretch at the top of their order. The bottom of their order could use some work, I'm not gonna lie, but Gavin Lux getting into a bigger starting role I think is gonna be fantastic for him. Trace Thompson was very good last season. David Peralta is a very underrated addition, and then I'm not entirely sure what's going on at second base and shortstop overall with Miguel Rojas being signed, and then Miguel Vargas being another option for them. So we'll see what happens in that middle infield, but of course Chris Taylor is fantastic depth for them, and he can play literally anywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if he played some outfield, shortstop, second base. Maybe he'll even catch a few innings, who knows. And they added some good veterans this offseason. We already talked about Miguel Rojas, we talked about JD Martinez, and then Jason Hayward. He's not great, but he's a good veteran presence to have on this roster. And I made a TikTok short about it earlier. I think Max Muncy is going to be an MVP candidate last season. He got super unlucky last year, and with the shift being banned, this dude rockets the ball every time he makes contact, and he has one of the best eyes in all of baseball. So I think Max Muncy is going to be an MVP candidate in the middle of their order next year. Moving on to their pitching, of course, we have the stable Clayton Kershaw, and Julio Urias has been fantastic over the last couple of years. He's been an absolute workhorse, and he's a winning machine. They just win when Julio Urias is on the mound. Tony Gonsolin was great last season, and Dustin May, I think, is going to be considered the best starting pitcher on this team going into next season. They did add Noah Syndergaard this offseason, and the Dodgers are really good at developing their pitchers. We saw it with Andrew Heaney and Tyler Anderson last year. Syndergaard's probably going to be the newest member of that Dodgers training lab success. And then we go over to the bullpen, and it's pretty solid. Daniel Hudson, Evan Phillips was fantastic last year. Brusdar Graterol, we know he throws 102 or whatever. And they had some other interesting additions. Shelby Miller's a very interesting addition to this bullpen, so we'll see what happens. It is going to be a huge blow being without Walker Buehler for most of this season, if not the entire season, but I do like JP Feyereisen, Alex Reyes, and Blake Trinan once they get healthy. They'll be a huge help in that bullpen down the stretch. So with all that being said, I do think the Dodgers are slightly better than the Padres still, but the Padres are definitely going to give them a better run for their money this year. Moving over to the NL Central, we've got our 5th place team, the Cincinnati Reds. I don't think this is a hot take. Some people might still think the Pirates are the worst team in the Central, but it's clearly the Reds in my eyes. I'll be honest, the average baseball fan could probably name you 2 players, maybe 3, in the Cincinnati Reds starting lineup on opening day. It's just a who's who of random players that they could find on the waiver wire, or they could sign for a minimum salary. It feels like the ownership group of the Reds just said, get some players that we can put on the field. I don't care who they are. There's a chance I could have signed with the Reds this offseason. So with that being said, I think the Reds are going to win like 60 to 70 games. I still love Joey Votto. How could you not? Jonathan India, I think, is going to have a bounce back year this season. Tyler Stevenson's going to be back and healthy, which I love to see. Tyler Stevenson, one of the most underrated catchers in baseball. And outside of that, I don't really want to watch any Reds games this season. Now, as much as I hate their their lineup, there are a couple of arms I want to watch on the Reds this season. That, of course, is Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, as well as Alexis Diaz. He was phenomenal. He's the brother of Edwin Diaz over on the Mets. So I'll definitely be on the lookout for those three guys, especially Alexis Diaz. His name has been brought up in trade talks, so we'll see what happens. He could be the next Raisel Iglesias trade. Next up, we've got the Pittsburgh Pirates. Now, talk about going from a boring bad team to watch to an exciting bad team to watch. I am so excited to watch some Pirates games this season. I think O'Neal Cruz is one of the most electric players in the sport right now. Brian Reynolds is still fantastic. Brian Hayes is underrated. They added G-Man Choi, who he might not be the best player in Major League Baseball, but he sure as hell is fun to watch. Andrew McCutchen is back in Pittsburgh, which is where he belongs. Carlos Santana was a great addition this offseason, a nice veteran presence there. And they have one of the best names in baseball on their bench in Ji-Wan Bae. Going over to the rotation, I did watch a Jolly Hollow video recently about Mitch Keller potentially being a breakout candidate in 2023. So he'd be someone who's fun to watch. They also added veterans Rich Hill and Vince Velasquez this offseason, so we'll see what happens with those few. But overall, it's still a pretty rough looking rotation. And then the bullpen's not looking much better, but David Bednar came on as a phenomenal closer last season, so we'll see what happens with him. And who knows, there always feels like a good reliever to step up on a bad team, so maybe one of these names is going to be a big addition at the trade deadline. You never know. So while the Pirates aren't going to be good next year, I do think they'll be exciting to watch, and they'll finish in 4th place in the Central. This take is going to get me in some trouble. Next up, we're going to talk about the Milwaukee Brewers. Go ahead, look at this lineup and tell me that it's better than the Cubs right now. Look me in the eye, tell me that this lineup is better than the Cubs right now. I don't care how good their top 2 starters are and how good their bullpen or the back end of their bullpen is. Christian Yelich, Willy Adames, Rowdy Tellez, William Contreras, that is not going to get it done. The 5 through 9 in this order on opening day is going to be awful. I don't even know what it's going to look like after one of their top 5 inevitably goes down with injury. I do like the addition of William Contreras. I think Jesse Winker could have a bounce back season in this ballpark. But this lineup and lack of depth is astonishingly bad. It's nearing Reds level of bad. I might take the Pirates lineup over this lineup. Now you might be saying, NMR, you just hate the Brewers, and you're right. I do hate the Brewers. I don't know why. I don't really have a reason to hate the Brewers. I just do, but I just think they're extremely overrated. I don't think this lineup is capable of making a playoff run, let alone finishing even top 2 in their division. Now, you can't talk about the Brewers without talking about borderline the best pitcher in baseball in Corbin Burns. We all know he's going to finish top 3 in the Cy Young voting as long as he throws 150 innings. Brandon Woodruff's probably going to be fantastic right behind him. I do have some faith in Freddie Peralta. I'm a little curious about Eric Lauer, and then outside of that, between Wade Miley and Aaron Ashby, we'll see what happens. And then their bullpen, outside of Devin Williams, I don't particularly love any of these arms. Matt Bush looked okay last season, and Adrian Hauser had some good starts for them, but it looks like they might be moving him to the bullpen for a little bit. I do have faith in the Brewers to develop some good pitching, but overall, you have to score runs to win baseball games. You would think the Brewers would have learned by now, but apparently they clearly have not. And that's why I have the Brewers finishing in 3rd place in the Central. Moving on, let's talk about the Chicago Cubs. I'll be honest, I think the Cubs had a fantastic offseason, and their lineup really shows it now. We have Nico Horner, Dansby Swanson, Ian Happ, Saya Suzuki. I love the addition of Cody Bellinger and Trey Mancini. He was great with the Astros last year. And then I don't particularly like Eric Hosmer, but we'll see what happens. I also feel like they have a little bit of depth with Patrick Wisdom. Yan Gomes is a great backup catcher to have. I do feel like there's a pretty steep drop off after that, though. So we'll see. Hopefully they can stay healthy this year. Now, the big problem for the Cubs comes in the form of their pitching. Of course, Marcus Stroman was pretty bad last season. I do expect him to hopefully have a little bit better season this year than he did last year, but overall, I think he's kind of cooked. Jameson Taillon was a solid addition. I think he'll provide some pretty good depth in that rotation. And then Justin Steele has pretty good projected numbers. We'll see if he can follow that up. But outside of that, it's a pretty steep drop off of talent for this Cubs rotation, so we'll see what they are able to do. They added Michael Fulmer, Brad Boxberger, and Julian Merriweather this offseason. They also should be getting Cody Hewer back this season. Howard Hewer, I don't even remember how to pronounce it. All I remember is that he throws like 100 miles per hour. So adding him to the bullpen should be a pretty big help for the Cubs. Overall, I expect them to be a slightly above average team. I'm looking at 81, 83 wins, that kind of range. But I do think they had a good offseason, and I definitely think they're better than the Brewers. And then in an absolute league of their own in the Central, we have the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, I love the Cardinals, but they do frustrate me a little bit because they could could be on par with teams like the Mets and the Yankees and the Dodgers. They just don't want to spend the money to compete on that level. Their lineup is so good, they could win 105 games next year if they just went out and got some starting pitching and some bullpen help. Tommy Edman's a top 10 shortstop in Major League Baseball. Wilson Contreras is a top 5 catcher in Major League Baseball. Paul Goldschmidt's a top 1 first baseman in all of baseball. Nolan Arenado is a top 5 third baseman in all of baseball. Brendan Donovan had a great rookie year last year. Tyler O'Neill has crazy power, despite having a down season last year. Lars Nootbaar is projected to be a huge breakout this season. Juan Yepes tears the cover off the ball. Dylan Carlson has potential. I'm a big Nolan Gorman fan as well. And don't forget they have Jordan Walker potentially making his debut this season. This lineup is legit. And then we get to their pitching staff. And I'm not saying it's terrible. I'm just saying they could have put forth more effort. They could have gone out and spent more money on a guy like Carlos Rodon. They could have gone out and got themselves a Justin Verlander. They're nowhere near the salary threshold. They're nowhere near the luxury tax. But instead, their rotation's solid. I mean, Adam Wainwright's a good veteran pitcher. Miles Mikolas is pretty decent. Jordan Montgomery looked really good there in St. Louis for a while after the trade. Jack Flaherty, we know what he's capable. He has Cy Young caliber stuff. And Steven Matz is a solid number 5. And then I even like some of the guys in their bullpen. We know Ryan Helsley was phenomenal last season. Giovanni Gallegos has been great in the past. Jordan Hicks, we know he can throw like 107 miles per hour. It's not the worst bullpen in baseball, and it's not the worst rotation in baseball. I'm just saying they can do better, and their fans deserve better with how much talent is on this roster. They should be projected to be World Series favorites, but because they refuse to spend in free agency, they are not. So I love the Cardinals. I love them going into this season. They're absolutely going to run away with the NL Central, but I feel like that's their ceiling. I don't see them going far in the playoffs. Next up, we're heading over to the NL East and talking about the Washington Nationals. Now, talk about another train wreck organization. There is just, I mean, they won their World Series in 2019, and then they just said goodbye to winning baseball games. This might be on par with the worst lineup in all of baseball. I like Keibert Ruiz, I like CJ Abrams, and then the rest of the lineup is just castaways from other teams. Corey Dickerson, Dominic Smith, Jeimer Candelario. Victor Robles is still playing Major League Baseball, who knew? The lineup is bad, and it gets worse when you go to the pitching. This is one of the worst. This might be the worst rotation in all of baseball. Patrick Corbin is the worst pitcher in all of baseball, and it's not even close. He actively hurts his team by pitching. He hurts his team every time he takes the mound. He actively makes the team worse, and he's making like $20 million this season. I think he's making $23 million this year, if I'm correct. Josiah Gray's still young. He's only 25, but I don't really see him breaking out like I was hoping he would last season. I like Mackenzie Gore, but I'm not sure that he's the ace everybody really thought he was going to be. It just feels like they took a lot of big swings with the trades they made for Scherzer, Trey Turner, and Juan Soto, but it feels like they took a big swing and a miss. And I'm not even going to talk about how awful this bullpen is. Worst bullpen in baseball. And thankfully, we are done talking about the Washington Nationals. Let's move on to a little less of a train wreck in the Miami Marlins. Now, the Marlins are weird. I don't know what to think of the Marlins. They have some pretty good hitters in their lineup. Luis Ariz, the batting champ in the American League last year. Jazz Chisholm, we know he's an elite level talent. I'm really hoping he stays healthy and we can see a full season from him. Gene Segura is a pretty solid signing. Garrett Cooper was an all-star last year. And outside of that, they have some guys with good potential. We know Jorge Soler has some good power potential. Joey Wendell had some good at-bats last year. I just don't feel like their lineup is deep enough to compete yet, and they don't really have any depth whatsoever. So it feels like as soon as Jazz Chisholm or Luis Ariz go down, this lineup turns into one of the worst in baseball, even though on paper right now it's close to league average. Now, the starting rotation is one of the best and probably the most underrated rotation in all of baseball. Sandy Alcantara was clearly the Cy Young winner last season. Johnny Cueto was great with the White Sox last year. Jesus Luzardo has been phenomenal since coming to Miami. Edward Cabrera has some of the nastiest stuff in the league. Trevor Rogers was a Rookie of the Year candidate. We'll see if he can start to figure it out again. And they have some other good prospects, Max Meyer, and if Sixto Sanchez can ever throw the damn baseball again. He was great in 2020 and then disappeared. I think their rotation is absolutely good enough to make the playoffs, but I don't think their lineup will get them there, and their bullpen leaves a little bit to be desired for me as well. Now, next we're going to talk about the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, I don't think this is a hot take, but I do think they're definitely the third best team in the National League East. The top of their order is fantastic, especially when Bryce Harper comes back, between Trey Turner, Kyle Schwarber, Rhys Rhys Hoskins and JT Realmuto, but I do think it falls off a bit from there with Nick Castellanos. I think Alec Bowman, Bryson Stott, and Brandon Marsh are all on a similar level offensively. We'll see if any of them can take that next step to become an above average hitter, but I think until I see that, I'm going to keep rating them as about league average when it comes to a bat. I love Edmundo Sosa and Josh Harrison on their bench, and like I said, when Bryce Harper comes back, it's going to be a pretty solid lineup. Now, the top of the rotation is really good with Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler. I think Ranger Suarez is the third best pitcher on this team, and then Taijuan Walker. Talk about a terrible signing. Oh my god, this is the worst contract of the offseason. I've said it multiple times. I don't like it. I think he's going to be terrible in Philadelphia. I think it's a horrible fit. The only worst fit for Philadelphia was Craig Kimbrell, who they also signed this offseason. It feels like they made a valiant effort to make their bullpen and rotation better this offseason, but I don't think they did it in the right way. I have a very big problem with who they signed and who they traded for, but we'll see what happens. They made the World Series last year against all odds, so what the hell do I know? I'm just some dude on YouTube. Oh yeah, I forgot to bring up Andrew Painter is absolutely legit, so we'll see what happens there, but I got the Phillies finishing third. Next up, we're going to talk about the New York Mets. Now, the Mets are a great baseball team, and I think they are very complete, but it's honestly a coin flip between them and the Braves, and I have the Mets losing that coin flip, finishing in second once again. Brandon Nimmo, Starling Marte, Francisco Lindor, Pete Alonso, Jeff McNeil. I love Mark Hanna, I love Eduardo Escobar, and then Francisco Alvarez in the minor leagues could be a legit bat at catcher. They also have some pretty decent depth when it comes to Luis Guillorme, Darren Ruff, and Tommy Pham, but I feel like they're missing a little bit in terms of bats. I feel like they could have a bigger bat if they had added somebody like Aaron Judge or, ironically enough, Carlos Correa this offseason. I would be a lot more sold on the Mets, and I'd probably have them finishing first. But with this current lineup, I just feel like they're not going to put up enough runs. Now, I will be honest, I don't know if they're going to need to put up runs with how good this pitching staff is. Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer, you know what you're going to get there. They're going to have elite level pitching. We'll just see if they can stay healthy at their age. The rest of their rotation, I'm not sure about. We know Kodai Senga was phenomenal overseas. We'll see what happens when he comes over here. Carlos Carrasco could be dominant. He was pretty solid last season. And Jose Quintana was phenomenal last year, but before that, when he played for my Angels, he was the worst pitcher in all of baseball. I have faith in the Mets coaching staff to get the better of these three pitchers, but we'll see what happens. I could see them all falling off, and I could see them all going and having fantastic seasons. Now, my favorite move the Mets made this offseason is this man right here. Brooks Raley, I think, is going to be a huge addition to their bullpen. They also signed David Robertson, which was huge. And then, of course, they have the most dominant closer in baseball currently in Edwin Diaz. So the Mets are absolutely going to be a problem. And with these top two in the NL East, I honestly have no idea. Like I said, it's kind of a coin flip. But we are going to talk about my first place pick, and that, of course, is the Atlanta Braves. Now, the Braves lineup is scary, man. You have Ronald Acuna Jr., Michael Harris, who was the Rookie of the Year last season, Austin Riley, Matt Olson, Sean Murphy, a big trade they made this offseason, Ozzy Albies, and then the bottom three with Eddie Rosario, Marcelo Zuna, and Vaughn Grisham. They also have one of the best now backup catchers in all of baseball in Travis d'Arnaud, as well as some pretty good depth. Jordan Luplow always hits well against left-handed pitching. Sam Hilliard can do the same with right-handed pitching, and then Orlando Arcia to kind of fill in the gaps there in the infield. Now, the real dominance for the Braves lies in their rotation. I think they have a better rotation than the Mets. I don't think that's a hot take. Max Fried and Spencer Strider, I think, are two of the best pitchers in all of baseball. Kyle Wright and Charlie Morton are pretty solid in the middle of the rotation. After that, it does fall off a little bit. Ian Anderson's been kind of a train wreck lately, so I don't really have a lot of faith in him. Hopefully, Mike Soroka can come back at some point this season. He's had health problems ever since he came up. And then Huascar Ynoa is going to be out pretty much all season with surgery, so I will say the Mets do feel a little bit better than the Braves at the moment, but like I said, I think the Braves lineup puts them just a smidge above the Mets currently. Let me know what you guys think. Do you agree with my picks for each of these divisions? Let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe if you made it this far into the video. We talk baseball almost every day, and we're going to have a whole lot of watch parties coming up and live streams soon, so you're not going to want to miss that. I appreciate each and every single one of you guys watching, and I will see you all in the next one. I hope you have a great rest of your day.